point, he's not going to sit at this angle, but this is what he's looking like. This is the front side. I have cleaned up this. I've just tack welded this on here onto the body. He'll actually sit something like this. We worked on his tail. We've got his tail welded on. I may have to do just a little bit more welding and grinding on it. But we textured the feathers on the tail before we welded it on. And it's welded on underneath here. Stuck a bolt through just because that's what I had, and I welded it to the body, and then I welded it to both sides of the tail. We want that tail rock solid in case somebody gets up there and starts trying to pull on it, stand on it, do kind of crazy stuff. We're going to have this in the public eye, so we're making it bulletproof. Turn this around so you can see him. At the current position of his head, he's kind of looking off this way, and that was basically not done on purpose, but it looked good, so I kept it. We can twist him back out straight, but that gives him a little bit more appeal to my eye. And so what we're doing now is we're just tweaking this part to make it match best we can, and then we're gonna weld this together. And just like the body, we may have to add in little pieces wherever we have bigger gaps. If it's tight together, we can just weld the edges, but if it's a bigger gap, we'll chunk a little piece of steel in there. But we're going to spend probably a couple of hours making this thing twist around and get it just as good as we can get him. We're not going to have this one's mouth open, but if you wanted the mouth open look, this is not a bad look right there. You just have them separated. But I didn't plan on that, so we're not going to do that this time. And we're going to touch up the welds. I see a couple welds that are coming, little gaps in it. Since we've ground all this up, we're going to go back over this really good and touch up any spots that have a hole in them. This is 1/8 inch steel. So when you weld two of these pieces together that's formed like this, you got a pretty good rock solid piece. Now we're going to weld this to the actual sculpture as well, but we want to paint him up as much as we can first, and then we'll just weld just a little bit on his tail is what the plan is, and have to touch that up, but we'll have the rest of him done at that point. But this is turning out very nicely. We got, like I say, got some more work to do. We're going to let that head cool off, clean it up with the wire brush, and keep test fitting it. Make sure it's going to fit on here and look right. We've had to adjust it right much. It's just how it is. You got to make them fit together the best you can. And we'll tack weld it. Once we get it pretty close, we'll tack weld it where it touches, and then beat on it and make it form over to where it's not quite touching. If it's too big a gap, we'll cut a little strip of metal and weld on both sides of that strip of metal. If it's, you know, less than your finger, you usually can just lay a piece of round stock in there and just weld right on both sides of that, and that works really well. Like say 1/4 inch or less, that works really good. And you can bend that just to fit the outside shape, and it's already round, and you got plenty of metal there to weld to. Alright, I'll talk to you about how I did the bird's eye. And this would work for any kind of eye that you want, but this is what I'd used. This is just a piece of pipe, And I heated this up, of course, and forged this down. Kind of not quite an oval, but kind of an ovalish shape. And I tried to make it smaller on the ends and fatter in the middle, basically what I wanted to do. And then on this end, I just kind of squished it and squared it up so it would fit in the vise. And so I got a choice. I can do it this way or that way. It's a little different depending on how you put it in the vise, but you pick out the way you want it to be. And then I used, this is the bird. Then I used the ball peen hammer. Of course, this is hot. And I used it just like this. And I beat down with the ball peen in here. And of course, it didn't have this part in it. It just made a dish. I just used this as a form to make my oval. Then I took this back to the forge and got it hot again and took it over to my anvil and laid it down flat. And I just simply hit the same spot, not crazy hard, but just tapping it. And I tapped it, and I can control what that circle looks like. And where it's at, so I can move it around. If I get off a little bit, I can hit more up or down or left or right, whatever I need. And on the bird, on most any bird, the eye is just above the beak. This one's a little bit farther down than I would have liked it to have been, maybe just slightly, but I think by the time we get them together, it's not going to matter. This is actually the back face of the bird. But that's how I did the eye. I know we'll have questions about that, but that's basically it. Now this is still being tweaked on, so I haven't taken the forge scale and wire brushed it or anything. So that's what you're looking at. And I'm going to show you the bird up to this point. I do apologize. I lost some of the footage of forming the head and neck. I got some of the footage. I don't know where it cut off, but I apologize for that. All I've been doing is tacking this thing together where it fits well. It fit well along both sides of the bill down here, at least in the middle. The bottom end is open a little bit. This top head here is open a little bit, but I've got to put in a piece anyway that comes out like a feather off the back of his head, so I think this will work out for us. So I'm not going to try to close that up. Maybe right here I may try to close it up just a little bit because this feather's supposed to come out about there. So I may close that up or I may just fill it in with a little piece. And I tacked it along here, and then I've been working on getting the neck pushed down. This piece here is out. The front piece we've got tacked pretty good on the bottom, and so it's not moving, so we're trying to affix this top piece to the bottom. Making it match up as best we can. We're using clamps, we're using heat, we're using the hammers, we're using whatever it takes to mash that thing over there to get it close enough to weld. So that's the process today. On this side a little better. We've got this side tacked, we've got this half of the beak tacked here pretty good. We need to force this down. We're going to put a little heat on this and hit it with a hammer. We'll see if that works. If that doesn't work, we'll try something else. But this needs to be forced down. This part I need to get closed, at least some, so I can weld it together. And I need this part down closer to his body. It wouldn't be terrible to have it off of his body some, like it's extra feathers. But we would like to be able to weld on this neck at least some, and across here at least down to this. This is where his original neck stops, at least down to there, and get it tacked on there good. And this takes a few minutes to get this hot with this torch. We're not yet with such a big torch. I'm trying not to get it like yellow hot. I don't want to add forge scale that I've got to take off, so I'm heating it slowly, and I want to get it about red, a dull red, and I can start whacking on it some, and it'll move. And the welding already has put heat into it, so sometimes we can move it just with the heat that the welder puts in it, but this bigger piece we're going to have to put some heat in it. And we can also put a clamp on it. if we have time. And that'll move it too. Got it significantly closer. Alright, see, that's touching now right there. That's looking pretty good. We'll put a little dot of weld right there where it very much touches, and we'll heat this up and bend this on around some. And we'll put a dot of weld back here where it's touching the neck too. So we just work it around slow, and that's the process we're going to do. Sorry about being backlit, but as you can see, we've closed this gap significantly in here. We still have pretty good gaps in here. We're just going to cut some little pieces of metal and fill that in. Like I said, the top of the head, I'd always planned on having a gap. Whenever you're doing something that's more or less round, you're going to, unless you just get way dished down, it's going to have some gaps, especially when you've got all these other turns. If we were making just two bowls, like making a globe, we could get those to fit together. But once you get a neck on it and it starts not being perfectly round, then that starts giving you problems, necks and beaks, and then you've punched in eyes, so everything's contorted. But we're only going to take a few minutes, and we're just going to weld up all this that we can get together quickly and let that cool off, and then we're going to come back and we're going to cut our little pieces, measure and cut our little pieces to go in here. Alright, quick update on the bird. We got his head on. It took about 2 days for me to cut all the little pieces and weld them in and grind them up. And then we've taken a grinder and we put some texture on his neck. This type of bird has lots of little long loose feathers, and so we're representing that with the texture. And then we have it usually has just 2 feathers sticking out here flopping in the breeze. I added a third one because that gives it stability. This thing, somebody's going to pull on it and try to bend it, I know. So when you have things in the public eye, you need to be able to prepare for that. We're going to work on his wings today. Alright, I'll show you what his wings look like. And what we have is 3 parts, three different shapes. I'll spread it apart so you can kind of see it. And plan is we're going to texture these as well. I textured this one already, just to give you an idea. And we have, of course, a front and a back wing. What I'm doing my texturing with is just this little 90-degree grinder deal here. And it works pretty good. I hate that it has this trigger on it. It drives me nuts that it has this trigger, because this trigger is hard to move. I guess that's the idea of it, but anyhow. But it's working pretty good. And I've got a station set up over here. I'll show you so I can hold it. Basically, we have our piece clamped into the vise. Get the clamp loose. I just have a little block of wood. It's got another block of wood underneath here that just makes me a little platform. I can tilt it. I can mount things to it. And this is what I use to do a lot of detail kind of work. It's nothing to it really. It's not hard to make. And then you just clamp your stuff down, and you can switch this around, put it at whatever angle is comfortable for you. First step we're going to do is clean up our marks where our plasma cutter cut this out, or where I cut it out with the plasma cutter, and we're just going to clean those little grooves up. I just so happen to have an old plow shear here, and it is the right kind of shape. So we're going to use this to heat our pieces up and to form them down into this. Now, cleaned up my pieces that I formed with the wire brush, and I've been playing with them a little bit, and I marked out where I want them to go, and we're just going to weld them on there and layer them on like shingles. This top one we may have to form a little bit, but I think the other two is pretty close. Alright, we've got our first weld on and ground down fairly smooth. And the wing, we've went around the corner here on both sides just a little bit, so that helps it. And we're going to hit a weld behind here and probably weld the two wings together eventually once we get the other one on. But we'll put a few more welds when we turn it over. We're going to put what I had originally thought, but I thought it'll work out. We're going to probably do something like that. And I'm just going to tack it on here, see what I think. I think I like that. I think that's looking birdie. We got his wings on there. Did pretty good. We're going to have to wire brush him up before we paint him, but we'll work on that. Next step is we've got to hang him up in our display, our background, I guess, backdrop, whatever you want to say, and work on how his legs going to look. We got his feet made, but feet and bottom of his legs made, but we haven't decided on the angle or positioning of his feet, which holes or do we need to drill and do or make new holes. So we're gonna work on that next. I'm gonna let him cool off so we can hang him up and handle him. This is what he looks like from the back. We welded solid right along through here, ground that down, redid our little lines with our grinders and blended in that best we could. There's his other side. This wing is out more. It looks pretty good. We need to wire brush him. We got some spots on there from the welder and the grinders and stuff. We're gonna get all that off. Sand him up good. We're gonna paint him tomorrow. Get some primer on him, but we'll get him cleaned up, get his legs right, and throw some paint on him tomorrow. But I think it looks really good. Really turned out well, I think. It looks like what it's supposed to look like, which is a Great Blue Herron. And they were concerned with the things not being pointy, stabbing people, or having kids cut themselves on it. So I went around and I made sure everything's as smooth as I can get it. And before I paint it, I'll go over it one more time, make sure we got all the rough edges and everything off of it, and just make sure everything's 100%. And but we made it so it's rock solid. Even up here is rock solid, because we know people gonna pull on it. All right, just about got our bird finished. I'm sorry I didn't get to video every aspect of this, but it would have been a month-long video if I had. I worked on this bird about 2 weeks. We started with its legs. In fact, the legs that go up inside the body, that's just a bent piece of rebar. It's actually attached in the body. Not only being bent and it's attached, it's got another bar that runs through the body this direction. And the body's made of 2 pieces, and then some little pieces filling in the gaps. We took some video of that. And then the neck is made of 2 pieces, and then it has, I don't know, half a dozen or more little pieces that fill in gaps. And then the head and neck are welded together, and then this piece that has the dangly feathers fills in another pretty good sized hole that was left between the 2 pieces. The wings are 1 piece each. The tail is 1 piece. So it's a lot of little pieces welded in this and smoothed out, so it looks like a bird. We hot forged most everything. We have either hammered in or ground in texture on all the feathers. Like these feathers here have hammered in texture. The feathers on the wing is ground in texture. I used a grinder to do that, mainly because it was such a big piece. It was hard for me to hold it and texture it well. It was getting heavy. Didn't feel I could hold that big a piece up and texture it. We forged in the eye, and basically I showed how to do that with the tools that I made. Basically a piece of pipe we squished down, made kind of an oval shape. We forged in the entire eye socket this way on this side, and then turned it over and just took the ball peen hammer and heated it up and hit down, and that's what forces your eyeball out. So that's, that's another technique, and it's very simple tools to make. Like I said, it was just a piece of pipe that we forged down to an oval shape. The painting, I didn't film any of the painting. This was a have to get it done kind of job. I could sit and paint on this bird for another month and probably still wouldn't be tickled with it. It looks good. It's nothing wrong with this paint job. It's just I would like to put more details, and I always do that. I always want to put more details in any of my art. But at some point you got to stop. And this project, we have to stop because we have to deliver it to Missouri. Today is Tuesday night, late, and it's got to be in Missouri 1 o'clock Friday. So tomorrow I will assemble it. This bird sits on our, I guess our background, if you want to call it something else. And we'll assemble it, and I'll show you some video of that. But it's an interesting procedure. Did lots of things that I hadn't really done before with this one. Making these little fatter portions of the legs, like what was actually instead of the little skinny leg, it's like where the meat would be. That was done with a pipe. Split the pipe, cut basically a wedge out of the piece of pipe lengthways, and forged it down and welded it back. That worked really good. Like I said, bending that piece of rebar, I think that was ideal, and then putting another bar across was awesome, because that allowed me to hold it easily. That allowed me to beat on it without it tearing up my welds. The feet look really good on the feet. Are made of 2 pieces. I think this was 5/8 round bar I used, but you could use anything you had. And this is one continuous piece, and basically I forged down both ends to the fingernail part and went back through and hammered in these grooves. Just like your finger, a bird has knuckles, and so you just imagine your hand. The only difference is a bird generally has 4 toes, 3 in the front and 1 in the back usually. Now some of them are different. Some of them have 2 in the back and 2 in the front, but depending on your bird. But then the front of this is this direction, so I took this bigger piece of rebar and welded a bolt on it. That's what's actually holding it up to this board. Welded a bolt on it, and then I used it. The ankle is over here. I didn't have this go through the middle of the foot. It's beside it actually, and I just welded up this. And so from the front angle here, this looks good. If you get on this side and look at it, you can tell that it's a straight bar and it's not as much ankle looking stuff over here. But that's going to be behind it, so I don't expect anybody to focus on that. But this part looks really good. Knee, and what I did with this rebar and this rebar are the same size. I think they're right about 1 inch. And I took vertically and cut an angle, a pretty long angle, maybe a 2-inch angle, off of this side of this one and this side of this one, so they'd match together at a pretty straight at the angle I needed them to be at. And then I just welded roughly around there and kept welding, building up weld, and made his knee look poopy, poked out and bumpy looking. That's what his knee looks like. Let me hold something up here that's white. You might can tell it better. But this bar doesn't go all the way through. It goes up here, and this one comes down. Both of them cut at an angle, and you could change that angle to make his feet narrow or farther out. And then, like I said, I heated this up with a torch. I wanted this to be an excellent weld because this is important. This is what holds your whole bird up. So I actually heated these 2 bars up with a torch. Before I welded, I tacked them together. Then I heated up with a torch, and I welded in there hard. And then I just kept welding, building up weld to make it look kind of bumpy. And grounded a little bit, wire brushed it, and that was it. I like the rebar for his legs. It gives a good texture. Birds' legs have scales on them, so that that kind of look without having to work too hard to get it. You do have to protect this, because if you hit this with a hammer, you lose your texture. So I had to use my leather mallet right much for that. And we talked about the little pipe here. That was something I'd never done before. Welded it on there really good, because the tail is actually what's going to help hold him up. Right now he's really stable this direction. If you wanted to push him over sideways, it'd be tough. But back and forth is where he's weak right now, see? And so we have a thing on this other side on his tail that we're going to weld hard to the cattails, and that will give him that 3rd point of stability. Need at least 3 points that you're going to have welded or bolted, so that you don't have this thing flopping around. Because you get it in the public and it flops in a bit, they're going to tear it up for you. So we're going to. All right, I made the entire bird first, and then I just welded this little piece. This is a little bit thicker than what the bird's made out of. The bird's made out of 1/8 inch steel. This is 3/16, and I welded it really good on both sides. And my cattail will run right here, and I'll weld it to the cattail tomorrow. When we get it set up, I'll show y'all how we do that. And then we'll just touch up the paint, whatever gets hot. I've removed the paint right off the edge here. I'm going to try to control my heat. I'm going to put a few big tacks on it, and then I'll run both of these little wells on both sides. But I'll leave it to cool between, so that it doesn't mess up my paint job. No more than it has to, but it is going to mess it up a little bit. And we'll protect this. We'll put some leather over this underneath it, so it's not splattering and getting stuff everywhere. We'll do what we can to protect our art. On his wings and his tail, we have ground in texture. Now his tail, I hammered it in with a cross peen because it was a smaller piece. But these wings were so big, I was having really hard time holding this thing, so I chose to grind them in. But we started with grinding out the edge of the feather, and then we took a different grinder with a smaller blade and we did the feathers, the little lines for the feathers. So that's how we got those marks. These marks were hammered in, these marks were ground in. We painted it in the same orientation as the marks with a little brush that doesn't look like much. I did this with this brush, and it basically is a brush that I've cut all the bristles off of. In fact, I cut them in the floor in here. And my wife came in and said, "What's this fur over here in the floor?" And it was the paintbrush bristles. But anyhow, you basically cut off all the bristles except just the last little bit. And I leave them thick down here and kind of taper this up, cut them a little bit taller, so these are a little stiffer. And then you make your paint color that you want, and you want a thin paint, pretty thin, and then you want to take I use paper plates for my palette. I'll take a clean plate and I'll brush this. Once I load my brush, I'll brush it in there until it's basically no paint left on this, and then that's when you start your streaking. And that way you can make feathers or wood grain or whatever, depending on the color that you use, what it looks like, the direction you do. But and then you do multiple passes of that, different colors, and it builds up and it'll look three-dimensional. And we've done 2 passes, a dark and a light here, and it looks pretty good. And like I said, with the texture of the grinder, that all adds to it. About the rain, and my shop's so small I can't get you all the way back far enough to get all of this in the picture. But we got him done, we got him mounted, bolts down through where his feet are, bolts where the flowers are, and we welded him back here against this piece of cattail, welded on the bolts, on the threads of the bolts, and to make the bolts not spin, welded into the bottom of this start cover too. So we got him on there, he's as good as he's going to get. We can shake him, can't really shake him, that's what we want.